All right, let's take a look at how to solve now rational inequalities. We've watched a couple of videos on how to solve polynomial inequalities. We're now going to do a couple examples of rational inequalities. Just to remind you, rational equations or rational functions is going to be a ratio of two polynomials. So your numerator and denominator must be a polynomial for it to be a rational function. So here I have a fully factored rational function where I have x plus 1 times x plus x minus 1 all over x. And that has to be less than or equal to 0. So with this, when it's fully factored like this, it's pretty straightforward. But there's one little caveat or one little thing you have to remember to do versus a polynomial inequality. So what we're going to do is we're going to take my numerator and we're going to set all of that equal to 1 or all that equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. And then I also need to look at my denominator. I'm going to set that not equal to 0. So I'm going to say x cannot equal 0. The reason why is because it's 0 here. If it was a number, I would need to move that number over and then combine them like we learned in Algebra 2 into a single rational function and get it set equal to 0 so we can actually start solving. But in this case, this is already ready to solve. We're going to treat this like an equal sign, and then we're going to do the inequality test. So here I can see that I'm going to have x equals 1, x equals negative 1, and of course an x still cannot equal 0. Now I'm going to use all three of these as my test values. Not as my test values, my critical values. Wow, negative 1, 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a hole right here because I can't have, this cannot equal 0. But here I can put a closed dot because of the equal to part for the negative 1. And then I'm going to do a closed dot for 1. So these are my critical values. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick some test values. I need a number less than negative 1 that's easy to do math with is negative 10. A number between negative 1 and 0 that's easy to do math with, well, I like negative 0.5. Between 0 and 1, I like 0.5. And then greater than 1, I like 10. And now I'm going to show you a little trick the way I think about this, because I don't really care about the number. I only care about the sign. I only care, is it a positive number or a negative number? Because right here, I'm looking for anything that's less than or equal to 0. The only type of numbers that are less than or equal to 0 are negative. So I'm going to put negative 10 here. I'm going to just keep in my head, well, negative 10 minus 1, well, that's a negative number. Negative 10 plus 1, well, that's a negative number. Now I know negative times a negative makes a positive. So I now have a positive on top and a negative on bottom, and a positive divided by a negative. This gives me a negative number. So I'm going to do the same thing for 0.5, negative 0.5. So negative minus a negative gives me a negative, but negative 0.5 plus 1 is positive, so this gives me a negative times a positive, which I now have a negative in my numerator, and a negative in my denominator. This gives me positive values. Do the same thing with 0.5. Now guys, you can put it in and do all the math you want, but this is just kind of a easier way to think about this, to kind of challenge yourself to think more about numbers instead of just, let me put it in and crunch out a number. Think more of the concept of what you're actually looking for. So 0.5. So 0.5 minus 1, that's negative. 0.5 plus a positive number is positive. So I mean now I have a negative on top. And then I have a positive on bottom. So a negative divided by a positive gives me a negative. Do it with 10. 10 minus 1, positive. 10 plus anything is going to be positive. So positive times a positive is a positive. 10 is positive on bottom. So I have a positive divided by a positive, which gives me a positive. Now, all I do is look for zeros. I'm looking for less than. So I'm looking for my negative signs. So I know my answer needs to be from here and then from here. Therefore, the way I write my answers, I'm going to come from negative infinity all the way up to negative 1. I touch it because of the solid dot. I'm going to skip over, and I can't touch 0 because I can never divide by 0. 0, and I'm going to go up to 1, and I can touch 1, and there is my answer. Not terribly bad with some fully factored form. I do want to challenge you guys to try to think of it the way I did it. Instead of just plugging them in and crunching out a number, think of it conceptually, positive and negative numbers. Because the number itself doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you have a negative million, a negative googolplex, or a negative 0.1. They're all less than 0. It doesn't matter what the actual number is. Hi, I'm Mr. Buzzard, and these videos are supplemental instruction for my students. If you found the video enjoyable, make sure you click the like button and click subscribe, as well as the bell for notifications to receive future videos on high school mathematics.